Antonella, thank you. I'm honored and delighted to be here. And it's been a privilege and a pleasure to see the previous presentations. I've learned so much, and I'm so encouraged by how much energy and change is in the air. So let me see if I can wrap up. The good news is we share a common diagnosis, a sense that for too long business leaders put their heads down, maximize shareholder value, and said, you know, climate change, the environment, that's just an externality. Inequality, that's somebody else's problem. I'm creating jobs. Why should I worry? And now I think we have a shared sense as a community that while it's very easy to focus on me and right now, it's really important to focus collectively on us and later. So that's very good news. And we have another piece of really good news, which is that the idea that we should become purpose-driven organizations, that an orientation towards our stakeholders is no longer a would-be nice, but a requirement. As we've heard from Daryl at CECP, telling us that the CEOs in his group are on the case, that they understand this, that the whole conversation in the US is changing. As we heard from Chris, and Chris pointed us to the importance of measurement and how talk is cheap. And the best way to make sure that we really become purpose-driven firms is to measure, both for our own use as we run firms and also for investors, because we must rewire finance. And that's another fantastically good piece of news, is it's clear we need to rewire finance. And so many of the world's largest and smallest investors understand that that's the case. The capital markets are moving. The hope of so many CEOs for so long that investors would focus on the longer term and on more than the financials is in the process of becoming a reality. And if that wasn't enough good news, Carolyn just gave us a whole bunch more good news. She told us, and Carolyn, I really hope this is right. I'd love to see this as a general rule. I was so excited by what you said, that sense of urgency and ability and resilience is not only for the COVID moment, but for now, for the challenges we face going forward. Because COVID has been an enormous blow and continues to cause huge suffering and hardship across the world. But as they say, COVID is the pop quiz. Climate change is the final exam, and there will be no vaccine. We need that energy and resilience if we are to green our economy. And fixing inequality, oh my goodness, I promise you fixing climate change is easier. We have the technology and the resources. It's relatively inexpensive. We could arrest the worst effects of climate change. And we have the technology and the resources to fix inequality. But oh my goodness, it's going to be a harder struggle. So we need every ounce of that resilience and focus. And I loved your phrase, as well as doing, we need to be. It's not only about what I do, but who I am. Because of course that is central to running purpose-driven companies. We have known for years that individual transformation is a very important part of building the emotion and the empathy and the skills that enable CEOs to both be superb business people and manage for the bottom line and generate profits, because can't crash the company. It's vital to give a decent return to investors and build the kind of collective understanding and sense of purpose and authentic mission that is the beating heart of the successful purpose-driven company. So lots and lots of good news. But here's the rub. building purpose-driven companies can be only the first step. I believe that even if a third of the companies in the world really embraced purpose and really took it to heart, that yes, that would make an incredible difference, but it would not solve the problems that we face. That in the end, there are some problems for which there is no business case. And so what I'd like to talk about just briefly is why might purpose be also really important as a catalyst for solving the broader systemic issues we face. My own sense is that the research is clear, that to solve massive public goods problems like climate change and inequality, we need to build societies that rest on three foundations: a strong, competitive, engaged free market, and also a democratically elected, transparent, accountable, capable government, and to hold them both in check, a strong civil society, an independent media that tells the truth and lets people know what's really going on, an independent judiciary that enforces the rules, strong representation for employees so they're not at the mercy of ever larger companies, and knitting them all together, a strong civic culture that says we're in this together, that none of us can succeed without the other, that if we are to build a just and sustainable capitalism, we need the free market, but we need the guardrails that keep the free market pointed in the right direction. Because yes, purpose-driven firms can raise wages and create high-road employment systems, increasing productivity and innovation as they do, but it's going to be easier if everyone raises wages. And firms cannot alone fix the issues that we face in education and healthcare if everyone is to have the chance to compete. Yes, purpose-driven firms can reduce fossil fuel usage and drive the transition to a renewable economy. But, you know, transforming the world's economy to be carbon-free, to transform transportation, buildings, agriculture, and electric power and distribution, that's a huge job. Without an active, competent business engagement, it's going to be almost impossible. So, if that's what we need, if we need the three legs of the stool, purpose-driven business, government, and a strong civil society, how can purpose-driven business get us there? Of course, one of the things we need are massive political and cultural movements across the world to put this into place. And I think we can all see that those are beginning to emerge. But I believe purpose-driven business has a central role to play. Why? Firstly, because purpose-driven businesses demonstrate that new business models are possible. So many people say to me, Rebecca, you sound great, but if it was that easy to make money and do good, everyone will be doing it. Well, of course it's not easy. I think it's a transformation, like the adoption of digital technology. It's a completely different way of thinking about businesses and their purpose, and it takes time and energy to work it out. So purpose-driven businesses going first, taking those first steps, can say to everyone else in their industry, come on in, the water's fine. And they can drive technologies down the learning curve, make entirely new ways of doing things, not only the right thing to do, but absolutely the obvious thing to do, as is already starting to happen in clean energy. And in plant-based meat, and in, I could go on, but it's already starting to happen. What else can purpose-driven firms do? Well, they can collaborate. Nearly every speaker has said collaboration is key to moving forward, and it is. Because if I can't improve the quality of the education in my local region, maybe I can work with all the other firms in the region, and together we can make a difference. Maybe I can't use only sustainably grown palm oil because it's too expensive. But if all my competitors use sustainably grown palm oil, then I'm not at a competitive disadvantage from doing so. And together, we can make a real difference with respect to deforestation. So purpose-driven firms and their business models become the seed point for effective collaboration. And more than that, because collaboration is super hard, they bring what an economist would call an irrational commitment to doing the right thing to those collaborations. They are firms you can trust to follow through. And that's what collaboration needs. How else can purpose-driven firms help catalyze the change we need? Well, Chris was all over this. Forgive me, Professor Marquis was all over this. Measures, measures, measures. We need for every firm to publish not only its financial metrics, but the measures of the impact it has on the world. My colleague George Seraphim just published a very rough first pass set of impact measures for 1,800 large firms. And his team's first pass analysis suggests that for a third of those firms, the environmental damage they cause is greater than their profits. I'm sure that number isn't quite right, but even if it's roughly right, there's nothing like measures to drive change. If you know that as a manager, if your customers know it, if your employees know it, that's the kind of driver of change. And of course, if you're going to make progress, you have to measure the progress. How else might purpose-driven firms really help to drive systemic change? Well, they might be partners with government. It's very easy to say we need public-private partnerships. They are super hard to do, as I'm sure anyone who's on this call knows from their own experience. But businesses that are firmly committed to doing the right thing, that have a broader vision of what is needed, that understand that they cannot get where they need to go without government, make better partners. In the textile industry, for example, the large textile firms of the West worked together for years and are continuing to work to try and get abuses like child labor and forced labor and sexual abuse out of their supply chains. Super hard. In the end, they are deciding that only with change in local governments, with better enforcement of labor regulation, with better enforcement of minimum wage, can they drive the kinds of changes that will lead to a robust and just supply chain. So purpose-driven business can help to drive public-private partnerships and perhaps even institutional change. Because how are we going to rebuild those three foundations I talked about? How do we grow and support democratically accountable, transparent, capable government and a strong civil society? Well, one of the ways we do it is we get business out of politics. In too many parts of the world, the political regime is captured by the largest firms. In the US, some of the fossil fuel companies spent hundreds of millions of dollars denying the reality of climate change and funding politicians dedicated to opposing environmental regulation. Other funds heavily funded politicians who pushed through massive tax cuts, and that made it much harder to fund issues like education and healthcare. So as business leaders, I think we need to rediscover our boundaries, that there are some things business does really well and some things government should do well, and that paradoxically, business needs to lobby to stop business lobbying. Let me close on one final note, and this is really aspirational. If you think I've been utopian so far, watch this. This distinction between to do and to be that Carolyn talked about, that I think many of us have found ourselves turning to in the middle of this pandemic. The visceral reaction that it's not just about running as hard and fast as we can, not about piling up as much stuff as we can, that we are crucially interdependent on everyone around us, and that in the end, what matters are other people and their health and well-being, and that in the end, that is where so much of our joy comes from. So perhaps purpose-driven business can help drive the kind of worldwide cultural revolution we need to take care of each other at scale. We have the resources and the technology to build a just and sustainable world. We even have a sense of how to do it. All we need to do now is keep pushing. Thank you very much.